It's time now for Countywide, a special presentation of Yavapai Broadcasting News. Join News Director Paul David and News Editor Philip Catafamo as they talk with our community's leaders, newsmakers, and people in the know. You'll hear about the hot topics in Yavapai County that affect all our lives. And now here's today's Countywide.
Welcome to Countywide. I'm Paul David. As always, it is great to have you in studio with us today. Brian Steinhardt is back. He is Prescott and Coconino National Forest Zone Fire Management Officer. He was here just a few weeks ago talking about the Tussock Fire on the Prescott National Forest. And before the show started, we were talking about what you do for a living, Brian. By the way, welcome back.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming in. And you were talking about how you get this bird's eye view of these wildfires. And we're going to get into that today. Brian's going to talk about the different aircraft used during wildfire fights. So we thought that would be kind of interesting to talk about that.
Sure.
And that's why we had you come back. Before we jump into the aircraft, there is one little aircraft that we don't want to see in wildfires, but I believe, did we see one on the Tussock fire?
I hadn't heard.
Okay.
I'd have to check with some folks, but it wouldn't surprise me.
Okay. But there's one thing we don't want to see in a wildfire area, and that is the drone.
Yeah.
The mighty drone. They are amazing. They are an amazing tool, and more people are using them. Search and rescue use them now to go fly out and search for people in canyons. You guys use them, I would think, to go over the top of fires, and you have no aircraft in the area. You have no people in that thing, and it can fly out and take a look at stuff. Military uses them. And then people on YouTube use them to get those beautiful shots of those resorts they go stay in, and they put them on you. So the drone is an amazing tool, but that tool has got to stay in its box when there's a wildfire going on. So let's address that a little bit more, because it's always something we talk about at the end of the show, but let's start with it.
So drones, they are very prolific. I mean, I even own a drone for my personal use, you know, and I follow all the rules and the guidelines and whatnot that are out there. And you know, the biggest trouble we have in wildfires is because of the accessibility of drones, and everybody can have one, and some of them don't meet the weight requirements to be registered with the FAA. People just take them out and go fly them wherever they want to go fly them, and they don't pay attention to the rules or the regulations. And of course, when you see smoke in the air, that's an immediate draw. Oh, what's going on? Let me fly my drone over and take a look at this. Well, when we have aircraft in the air trying to fight that fire and a drone enters the airspace, that causes a lot of complications. First off, in the aircraft that are flying, typically we don't see the drone. They're too small. You don't know they're there. You get a report from the ground troops telling you there's a drone in the area. And at that point, until we can identify where that is and get that thing on the ground, we have to cease all air operations. So whatever I have flying in the air at that point in time has to go back to a base and land and be shut down until we clear the airspace.
Oh, come on, Brian. It's just a little tiny toy.
Yeah.
It's no bigger than this piece of paper, probably.
Yeah, but the impact of one of those on an aircraft, it can be catastrophic.
There you go.
That's the thing. And again, you know, granted, for the most part, the aircraft that are flying on those fires, it's called a low and slow profile. We're close to the ground. We're doing anywhere between 120 to 150 knots on average as we're circling and getting ready to put retardant down, or the helicopters are coming in between 90 and 110 knots. So it's not a really fast profile that we're flying, but you got a drone coming the opposite direction, and again, you don't see that, and it makes impact with, you know, one of the engines makes impact with a wing, or the windshield, and again, you got a catastrophic incident. And so that's the whole premise behind the, you know, if you fly, we can't program that's come out, and that's basically telling and asking the public, we know you're interested in what's going on out here, but don't compromise our safety and our ability to do the job, and keep your drone put away. And when we're not on the fire and you have permission to go do that, that's fine. But that's the other thing, is when we put that much aircraft up, we put up what's called a temporary flight restriction through the FAA. And if you intrude into that, you're subject to fines and penalties and potential jail term if you're caught.
Now there's the danger to the aircraft, the people in the aircraft. And now that aircraft is maybe not helping the people down below who are on the ground in fire, also in danger. The cost also has got to be phenomenal. I mean, if we've got a DC-10, which we'll talk about in the show today, with all that slurry and a retardant in it, and it's got to turn around and go back, I mean, they don't fill that up in Prescott, do they? That's got to be, is that a Phoenix thing?
The VLAT
Like
fills
so?
out of Phoenix and Fort Huachuca down by Tucson is where they can fill out of.
So they got to fly from all the way there. Okay, so I'm just picturing this DC-10. It's full. It's coming up to hit a fire on the Prescott National Forest that's maybe threatening a community, and definitely the firefighters are always in danger down below.
Right.
They get there, there's a drone in the air, you got to turn around and go back. They can't just go land at Cottonwood Airport.
No.
They got to go back to where they came.
Back to Phoenix or back to
what
Fort
a waste.
Huachuca, depending on where they came from or where we can get them landed safely. And also at that point, with most of the aircraft, they can't land loaded. So they have to go and jettison the load in an area that we've designated for jettisoning retardant that's not used. And so there goes,
how much?
10 to 12,000 gallons of retardant, anywhere, I don't know the actual cost, it's somewhere between $2 and $4 per gallon. So there you go, right out the window, gone.
Waste of money, waste of
no
time.
purpose. Yep.
And everybody that was in danger is still in danger, and they're sitting down there in danger, and they were waiting for that to arrive, and now it's not going to arrive.
Right.
And now it's like, whoa, what do we do now?
And that's the thing about
Right.
the aircraft side of it, is everything that the aircraft is doing is in support of the ground. So if we're putting retardant down, we're putting water down, we're just being eyes in the sky to help lead and direct them to the fires or whatever the case may be, it's all in support of the folks on the ground. So now we took that aspect away, and so they have to change their tactics to something where we're no longer being able to support them. And yeah, it can make a serious impact. There's cases where drones have come in and aerial firefighting has been shut down, and it ended up resulting in homes being lost because there was no ability to slow the fire, to buy the time necessary to defend, and yeah, people lost their homes.
The Goodwin fire comes to mind down in the Mayer area. I know we had drones once or twice that came in there. I think a drone actually went up to one of the watch-out towers and took a picture of the guy on the watch-out tower, if I remember right.
That is correct.
And they caught somebody for that, and they got the drone for that, but they were not prosecuted for that. If I remember correctly, the charges were all dropped. And
That's what I understood. I didn't follow the case to the end.
I did.
Yeah, but I do know that, that individual posted stuff on their social media account, which is how they were able to trace back to who it was. I had a fire last year on I-17 where we had called in for a couple of the single engine air tankers, the 800-gallon, single engines, and right as we were getting ready to drop, he was on his final approach coming in to put a drop right along the edge of the freeway and stop the spread of the fire. I had a drone come right over my head from the traffic that was stopped. And so I had to wave him off, tell him to go around till we could figure out where the drone was coming from. Fortunately, DPS was on scene, and they were all over that. That drone was grounded in less than 2 minutes.
They found it quick.
And somebody was in trouble.
All right.
So, but yeah, it does compromise the ability to be effective.
Okay. All right. So there's a good long talk about drones and why drones are dangerous to have in a wildfire area. I think that's the most time I've been able to give to talking about drones, and I'm glad you were here to be able to do that with me. Let's take our first break. Prescott and Coconino National Forest Zone Fire Management Officer Brian Steinhardt is in studio today. Stick around. Countywide back in just a couple minutes.
Who doesn't dream of home improvements? Perhaps your kitchen, the real living room. Maybe the bathroom, where you bookend your day. Langstrand Contracting is your one-stop shop from tear down to finishing touches. With 35 years of experience, Chris and his team will work with you to match your family's style and budget. Call Langstrand Contracting today for guidance in bringing your vision to life.
Hi, this is Greg at Verde Solar Power. You know, Arizona has lots of clean, renewable sunshine, and we want to help you take advantage of it with our quality solar installations, and we offer to beat any written offer on a residential solar electric system. So bring us your electric bill and let us show you how solar power will save you money. We're located conveniently here in the Verde Valley and are dedicated to helping the valley go solar. So remember, the energy solution comes up every morning.
Starting in the late 1920s, Grandpa Gettle and his brothers laid the groundwork for what would become a family legacy. Almost 100 years and 100 patents later, Gettle's High Desert Mechanical continues to raise the bar of quality heating, cooling, and plumbing products and services in the Verde Valley.
Call Gettle's High Desert Mechanical Heating, Air Conditioning, and Plumbing at 567-2200 or online at GettlesHDM.com, providing solutions for your comfort. Don't settle, get Gettles.
Welcome back to Countywide. Brian Steinhardt from Prescott and Coconino National Forest is in studio today. We're going to talk about aircraft basically used on wildfires. We talked about drones and the dangers they pose. Aircraft. So when you were here last time, you were talking before the show, and what sparked Ryan and my interest in that is that you were mentioning how you've got this bird's eye view of the fire that's going on down below, and you're in charge of, I guess, like a conductor, kind of orchestrating water over here, retardant over here, we got a crew over here, we got a crew over there, and knowing where everybody is, and then helping them. And as you mentioned just now at the beginning of the show, every bucket of water that's dropped, every drop of retardant that's put down, we don't call it slurry anymore.
Slurry.
Slurry? Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I like slurry.
I know.
So it's slurry. So every one of those that's dropped is there for a reason. I mean, it's not like they're just dumping it to dump it. It's a reason. But you're one of the people that's up in the air orchestrating this.
Yeah, one of the qualifications that I've gotten in the past few years is what's called Air Tactical Group Supervisor. Shortened term is Air Attack. I sit right seat in a twin engine plane and sit above the fire at a predetermined altitude and control the airspace of that incident. And I check aircraft in and out of the airspace and then direct where those tactics are going to be employed by talking to the ground and coordinating with them. Where do you need the retardant, and where do you need bucket support, whatever it might be. So it's almost like an airborne air traffic controller in a way, but with some tactical applications to it. And
now, is it safe to say you're sitting in above what's going on down below? So these other aircraft are coming in underneath where you are?
Everything is underneath me.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, the only time we'll put something above is like a media helicopter that wants to come in. We'll put them above us typically so that they're not inside the flight profile of the maneuvering aircraft.
Sure.
Yeah. And it's kind of a ballet. You have to orchestrate a lot of stuff. I mean, when you got helicopters coming one way and air tankers going another, you have to set up means for them to stay separated both vertically and horizontally. So it's three-dimensional chess.
But how do you do that when you're moving about too? I mean, your plane's just not sitting there hovering in the air. You're moving about as well. So
you pick out geographic features and you put up what's called like a virtual fence. Okay. So you tell a helicopter that they can't go past a certain ridge line because on the other side is where the air tanker is going to come in and do their drop. So they hold at that ridge until the air tanker goes by, and then you clear them through to go to do their mission. Things like that. Sometimes you'll separate them by putting one on one side of a fire and one on another side of the fire, and never shall the two meet. So there's a lot of different ways to do it. But like I say, it's like a three-dimensional chess game. And
I'm with you on that.
It's challenging, but that's part of why I like it so much is because you're talking to a lot of different folks all at the same time to make something, happen that supports those people on the ground, because that's what we're there for. So my typical flight profile, if I've got what we call a full stack, so I'm running air tankers and helicopters, I'm sitting about 2,500 feet above the fire. Okay. 1,500 feet above the fire will be my air tankers, 500 feet and below will be my helicopters.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and so then as things start to move around, we need to bring those air tankers down to a maneuvering height. That's where I got to get those helicopters moved off to the side so they have room to maneuver and come down, because your standard air tanker drops about 150 feet off the ground. If you're running the very large air tankers, they're going to be dropping about 200 to 250 feet off the ground.
That's nothing.
It's not very high.
No,
but
it's not.
The idea is for that, when that slurry comes out, is you want it to come down like a rain, like a fine rain, and coat everything.
It probably spreads a bit too.
Yeah, exactly. That's what you're looking for. You're looking to maximize that coating and that coverage. If you come down at too low of an elevation or an altitude, it comes in like a brick, and it will tear limbs off of trees. It will snap trees in half. I've seen drops in the past. There's video footage where it's crushed the cab of an engine.
Oh, wow.
It's heavy stuff. It's about 10 pounds per gallon.
Okay.
So, yeah,
makes sense.
You figure you've got a 3,000 gallon air tanker flying in, and he's got 3,000 gallons on board. He's got 30,000 pounds. It's doing about 125, 130 knots when it comes out of that. If he's at the wrong altitude, it'll tear the ground up. It's dangerous. So that's why people have to get out from underneath those things.
Who shows up first in a fire? In terms of aircraft?
That just depends. Location, you know.
Who would you prefer? Let me ask you this, Brian. Who would you prefer to be the first one to show up? When you get a call, like let's use the Tussock fire as an example, because it didn't, I don't want to say it didn't grow really fast, but it grew considerably quickly because it was in the Manzanita, and that stuff is explosive, and it's very, very dry this year.
Right.
Who do you want to show up first, and what do you want them to do when they first show up?
Normally when you get a fire like that, there's a pre-planned dispatch that'll go out. So X number of engines will be responding, some overhead will be responding from the ground, and occasionally in those pre-planned dispatch it might say helicopter. So you'll get a close helicopter to start to launch out first, which is great. It's eyes in the sky immediately, starts to help coordinate that. Next in for me, if we're going to start bringing in a lot of metal, you do reach a point where you do have to have an air attack or a supervisor of some type over the site. So I would like to have an air attack in as soon as possible, because that person really helps coordinate that tactical advantage from the air and can look at something and understand, like most air attacks have a lot of ground experience. We were on the ground a long time before we ever transitioned to that right seat of a plane.
Sure, makes sense.
And so when we look at that picture from above and we start talking with the folks below, we get a real good picture of what we need and what we think it's going to take to get around something. And that ability to order that, and you have the on-site supervision right there, it's just a lot easier for when multiple aircraft come in. So it's preference for some people. I mean, me if I'm playing the air attack, yeah, I want to be there first. Mm-hmm. I want to control that airspace and set the tone for how we're going to do business. But short of that, you know, you can have a helicopter come in and work just with the ground folks and be just as effective on a smaller fire. They can even call in an air tanker, and you know, as long as it's just one air tanker, they're doing okay. You start mixing the two, supervision has to come in.
I know they're all neat. Brian's been putting the pictures up on the screen, and then you sent us a video too of flying over a wildfire as well. So if you get a chance, you definitely want to tune in and watch the show if you're listening right now on the radio. Before we have to take a break, I want to hear about this guy kind of came in and stole the show a few years back. Maybe it's even more than a few years ago, but the DC-10 started showing up, and there's not a single wildfire season that goes by that you don't see a shot of this behemoth plane that we've all probably traveled on to fly somewhere, but here it comes in, and it's just got this slurry in it, and it's unbelievably impressive.
Seriously impressive.
Yeah.
That video that I shared was actually when I was air attack over the cellar fire on the Prescott in 2019. Oof. And I was filming, from my seat, I filmed the VLAT, the very large air tanker, the DC-10, doing his drop.
The VLAT.
Yeah, the VLAT.
Okay.
Just so you could see how far he can carry that retardant out. I mean, they're impressive, they're incredible. What those pilots can do with that aircraft is amazing. I mean, there's some pieces of ground where I'm thinking, oh boy, and the pilot comes flying in, he goes, oh, this is just fine. And he does his mission, and because he knows his aircraft, he knows.
How
his
low is he though when he's doing something like that? You mentioned it already, but
he should be about 250 feet above the ground. Yeah, should be.
Again, I say that's not much.
Well, and you got to realize you got terrain that's lowering and rising as he's coming over that. It's not static, so at any point in time he can be above or below that margin.
And he's so big too.
It's a huge plane, but they are incredible.
So when something like that goes by, like you mentioned in the last show when you were here, slurry is not something that really puts a fire out. It's something that slows a fire down so that crews can get in there and do hand lines and things like that to keep that fire from spreading. So it's a way to slow a fire down.
Right.
How we have to take a break here about 30 seconds. How big of a swath can that thing lay down, and then how long does that swath last for?
Depending on how they drop and what altitude they're at, you could get coverage easily as wide as 30, 40 feet.
Okay.
Easily, sometimes wider. It just really depends on how it comes down. As far as how long it lasts for an incredibly long time. It coats the fuel that's down there and makes it more resistant to burning. And so basically, until you wash it off, it's going to stay there.
Okay. And then how long of a stretch? I mean, 30, 40 feet wide, but how long of a stretch does that thing?
It depends on how much retardant.
Okay.
And
let's say it's full.
And what coverage level. So there's different coverage levels that we have.
Holy moly.
Yeah, which if we're going to take a break, I'll get into that afterwards.
Yeah, we'll only have like 3 minutes left after that then.
Oh my gosh.
So, I know. There's never enough time. There's never enough time. Let's take our second break. Prescott and Coconino National Forest Zone Fire Management Officer Brian Steinhardt in studio today. We're talking aircraft used on wildfires. Stick around. Countywide back in just a couple minutes.
Cliff, this seems like a really terrifying job. Why do you do it?
I love protecting the bull riders when they get bucked up.
How big are these bulls?
12 to 2,200 pounds of pure muscle.
You're not cowed by any of this, obviously. Is there anything that scares you?
Yeah, distracted drivers terrify me.
Two things we can count on every year:
a new set of tax rules and great weather here in northern Arizona.
Jackson Hewitt Tax Service, locally owned and operated by Lewis Rice since 1997, is here for you all year long.
Your neighborhood Jackson Hewitt Tax Office will help you in all of your taxing situations.
Electronic filing is always free with your tax preparation at Jackson Hewitt Tax Service.
Get more in return. Call 1-800-234-1040 for an office near you.
The EPA says C&B Construction ranks in the top 1% nationally. C&B Construction invites you to see what energy efficiency and indoor air quality can be. We have won another Department of Energy Innovation Award, and C&B Construction is the only contractor in the country to win 6 consecutive EPA Indoor Air Plus awards. Experience our zero-energy, move-in ready homes at Crossroads at Mingus.
C&B Construction, locally respected, nationally recognized. Find out more at candbhomes.com.
Award-winning Soundbites Grill is an entertainment restaurant located in Uptown Sedona at the Hyatt Pinion Point Resort. Open for lunch and dinner, featuring fresh fish, all-natural hand-cut beef, even a full vegan menu. Family-friendly, open 11:30 to 9, late dining on Friday and Saturday. Soundbites Grill has some of the best views of the Sedona Red Rocks. Offers world-class entertainment, food, fun, and music.
Welcome back to Countywide. We've got just a few minutes left in the program. We're talking about the DC-10 that drops that huge amount of slurry, and then Brian brought up the fact that there are different levels of fuels.
Different levels of coverage.
Different levels of coverage.
Of retardant based on your fuels. Yeah,
okay.
and it's funny because we were just talking about fuels, and that's the vegetation that's burning.
And I thought he was talking about what he was putting in the plane.
Yeah.
So, no, it's what's burning on the ground.
Yeah.
So.
Vegetation to me is fuels because that's what I've been taught, and that's, to this day, I still say, oh, hey, check out the fuels.
I've been taught it for 30 years. I should have thought about that too. Right. So, okay, so what's a level 1, and then what's the top 8?
So you have different coverage levels starting at 1 to 8. Okay. 1 being a large disbursement, whereas if you did a coverage level 1 with a DC-10, you might get a mile to almost 2 miles of continuous retardant all the way out.
Oh, wow. Okay.
But it's a very light coverage, so you would use it in your shorter grasses, for example.
Along Sunset Point.
Yeah, Sunset Point. Now, I wouldn't even go a coverage level 1 there, just because I know the grasses. I would use a coverage level 3.
Okay.
But I could still get a good mile of retardant out of a DC-10.
Tall, yellow, and fast burners.
That's it.
Always is.
The idea is you want it to come down like a rain, but you want it to be thick enough to actually coat the fuel.
Gotcha.
So if it comes down too light, then the fire can burn underneath because you didn't actually get into that fuel bed. Yeah. So there's some tricks to it. You know, we start talking about these chaparral fires like, you know, the tussock with the manzanita. Mm-hmm. You're probably dropping a coverage level 8, which is the most you can, And so you'll shorten your drop distance significantly. So whereas before maybe you would get 3,000 feet of coverage, you might only get 1,000 feet of coverage or less. There's a lot of factors, the wind, turbulence coming off the plane, the way the terrain sits. So the idea though is once you get some retardant down, and it's colored that nice pink and red for a reason. And that's so us in the air can see where we were, and then we can figure out where to make the next line and tie it in and keep that retardant moving. Because if it wasn't colored, we wouldn't know where we were dropping.
What's the turnaround rate on something like that? So if let's say the DC-10, we've got like a minute left. DC-10 comes in, it drops its slurry, its retardant, and then it's got to go back and pick it up and refill it, refuel, refill, take off. How long would it take for that pilot to get back?
Depending on where you're at, but let's say it's like the Tussock fire and they're filling out of Phoenix. I would suspect his turnaround is probably around 45 minutes. So flight time to Mesa Gateway, reload the plane, flight time back. And you got to realize you're flying through Phoenix, which is Class B airspace, and there's a lot of deconfliction that has to happen there to be able to come through that airspace. But at the rate that these things travel, honestly, because something coming out of Fort Huachuca fully loaded can be somewhere over the Prescott in 20 minutes or less. So it's pretty nice having these what we call the next generation aircraft. I mean, when I first started, everything we had was turbopropped, and if you ordered something and it was coming out of say Sacramento, coming down to here, it'd be a couple hours before you'd see it. Now you can see it, hour and 15.
Nice technology, right? We're out of time. Brian Steinhardt, thank you for coming in again.
Glad to be here.
Appreciate it. Prescott and Coconino National Forest Zone Fire Management Officer Brian Steinhardt. Put those campfires out and keep them out. This is Countywide. Thank you for watching and listening, and we'll talk to you again next time.